Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Summit Live. Today, we have a very, very exciting topic. Many of you have been raving for it, waiting for it, and we are finally here. And the topic, of course, is how to make investors line up and beg to give you money. Today, we have Antonio White, also known as the Pitchfreak. He's responsible for over 750 million US dollars in liquidity events. So if you're joining with us live today, type in hashtag live. And if you're watching us on the replay, type in hashtag replay. We would love to know who is joining us and watching us in this session. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome everybody to the stage, Antonio White.
Ching Yu, how are you? Great to see you.
I'm good. How about yourself, Antonio?
Doing terrific. I'm so happy to be with your audience and to have you your kind invitation. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a great time to talk about helping people get the attention of investors.
Yep. Amazing times we live in, and then especially in an interconnected world. I think like what you mentioned, with the lockdown, and then the rise of Clubhouse, for example. We see so many opportunities for investors and entrepreneurs to connect with each other and to make great things happen. So great times indeed. So yeah, share with us, a bit about your history on how is it that you became you got involved in the fundraising industry.
The fundraising industry for me started in about 1995, 93, 95. And my early background is in helping Silicon Valley startups who received venture capital money to produce their customer launch demonstrations through multimedia, interactive multimedia, so the CD-ROMs and things like that. So company would get their venture capital, and then they'd have to launch their business with a marketing launch, which included a demonstration of how their application worked. And companies would pay us tens and in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars back then to produce these interactive multimedia presentations that would go to customers, they would go to the press to help to position these organizations as leaders in their area, help to educate key early customers on the benefits of these applications, and ultimately would be used to acquire new customers, which was the lifeblood of these early startups. So that's going back to 1993. From there, started working with a lot of marketing VPs and began to develop a very keen interest in helping people articulate their message effectively. We're dealing with a lot of startup companies, a lot of high-tech, deep technology companies, and the big trouble that they were having back in those days was just, how do I simplify a very complex idea so that folks can be interested in it, engaged in it, want to learn more? And that's really still what we're doing today. So Pitchfreaks today is really doing that, but in this case, we're helping founders who are trying to raise money articulate their very complex, innovative ideas so that they can be relatable to investors in hopes to get the money that they deserve so they can build their business.
Wow. Okay, thanks for sharing. 1993. Wow, that has been, you've probably more or less seen it all, right?
I've seen a few things.
Yeah. So why did you personally decide to come up with the brand Pitchfreaks and to start helping entrepreneurs raise finance?
Well, Pitchfreaks is really core to my branding philosophy. And the branding philosophy, which I've leveraged for many companies over the past 30 years, is really focused on, your name itself is a pitch. And how you present yourself, you're either doing yourself a favor or you're missing out on an opportunity. And ultimately, even your name itself can work very hard for you to be able to captivate and engage people. With a name like Pitchfreaks, it's very hard to ignore. People are normally very curious at what the name Pitchfreaks is, what it means. It sounds a bit strange. I'm not sure if this is a crazy person or if this is somebody who knows what they're doing. So it's a talking point. It's a point to get interest and engagement. So even a one-word pitch, which is what a great name is, your company name is a one-word pitch in many cases. And so the question is, how hard is that one name working for you? So I see a lot of companies that don't put too much thought in their name, or they put an idea about their name that is something that is simply just interesting to them from their perspective. And they're not looking at creating a name that's actually going to reach their customers and work hard to compel and engage them. So Pitchfreak is designed very specifically. Number one, pitch is very clear. People understand what I'm doing when it comes to pitching. And Freak is meant to say, look, I don't take myself very seriously, right? I take you very seriously, but we're meant to have fun. This is meant to be an enjoyable experience. In the States, a freak is somebody who has a very deep knowledge about something, a little bit strange because they spend too much time. Like a freak is kind of like a geek or a nerd in a way. And so it's somebody who has a particular skill set or a deep interest that's a bit unusual. So there's also terms that are a bit disparaging, but freak normally is associated with people who are engaged with high performance achievement of some sort. So I thought that was a nice, fun combination to put together to get people interested.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if anyone has seen your brand, they'll be like, wow, it just pops and then it just captures people's attentions. And yeah, definitely the explanation behind the word and use of freaks, is very, very interesting. It's like what they say, society sees people who are truly obsessed with their art and craft. They label them as freaks. Man, here you
Exactly.
go. We have a pitch freak with us right here today, everybody. Yeah. So throughout your journey, what you find is the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make when they want to initially start raising funds for their businesses?
The biggest mistake I think that founders and entrepreneurs are making is making sure that they have a clear understanding of their market and their customers and how many people, if we break it down, do they have a clear understanding that there are people ready to buy their product? We call that message to market match in the speaker terminology. We call that product market fit in Silicon Valley terms, so product market fit. Most companies, nearly half of the companies in Silicon Valley fail because of a lack of product market fit. And what that means is that they've developed an idea or technology or a service, and they were not able to find enough customers to support them in purchasing that service. And as a result, that investment is ruined, it's wasted, or it has to be repurposed into another type of business. So in Silicon Valley, you hear in technology companies, often a company is pivoted. And what that means when you pivot is that you had an initial idea of a business that you want to be involved with, but you could not find enough people to pay for that business. You didn't have enough product market fit. And so what happens is a technology company often will say, well, I have this different type of technology. How else can I apply this technology to a different market need and then pursue a different market positioning and a different marketing message as a result of that? So the number one challenge you need as a founder before you talk to investors is, are there people who have demonstrated that they're willing to pay for your product? That's number one. The biggest problem is I see too many founders trying to get access to money and they have no evidence that somebody is going to pay them money before they talk to investors. The fastest, easiest way to get investors' attention is to actually already have customers. And technically, the best way and the easiest way to get in front of investors and get them excited about you is to not need them.
Yeah, and it's like what they say. They don't want to smell your hunger or starvation, that you're desperate, right? So
That's right.
they will come to you, and I suppose that sparks the question: how would an entrepreneur or business owner know when to pivot and when to persevere on the path that they've set themselves on? Where's that
That's
fine
yeah.
distinction?
Yeah, great. That's a great question. There's a discussion here for businesses. Actually, I just had this morning on the call, and the question is, what approach should you take to decide to cease operations of your business versus hold out for something? And that really applies to metrics that you establish for yourself over some period of time, right? We're all guessing every single day how big or how large our opportunity is for our customers. Nobody knows for sure. We don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Nobody knows this, right? In Silicon Valley terms, we normally look at an 18-month cycle. we try to project at least 18 months of planning what we're going to try to do to reach an important milestone. And that milestone is going to allow us to make a determination on realizing some kind of a goal, whatever that might happen to be, that's going to transform the value of our business. And technically, all we're trying to do is validate a business idea. The whole idea for your business is based upon a hypothesis. If I offer this product or this service, people will buy it, right? And so you're trying to constantly prove that. And in Silicon Valley terms, and technology companies around the world, of course, we're looking mostly for companies that can scale, companies that can grow very large, have many hundreds of thousands or millions of customers using your product on a very regular basis. And so these companies, SaaS particular models in particular, right? They're designed to meet certain milestones within a certain period of time. So, for instance, what should you be able to do within 90 days of your business? If you aren't able to achieve that in 90 days, then why weren't you able to achieve that? If there's good reasons for why things might not be working the way, then you can make adjustments, of course. The key thing is if you've gone through an extended period of time and you're not able to determine why things aren't working, and more importantly, why people aren't buying, then that's going to give you a clue here that you might need to pivot. Ultimately, how long can you survive without somebody giving you $1 is really the ultimate goal. And so if you're asking for enough money to give you enough lead time so that you can provide some sort of service offer sample to a customer, right, that's really the ultimate determining factor. And so it depends upon what you're offering. Really, is it very complex to purchase or to develop this application that you're doing, or to manufacture it, right? Or is it something that can be done quickly? Often what we talk about is this idea of an MVP, minimal viable product. And the idea behind a minimal viable product is it gives people a sampling, a little taste of what it is you can achieve, enough for them to decide if it's something that they'd be willing to buy or not. And they can test it out, they can ask questions and so on. And your job, especially on the tech side, is to be able to create that MVP as cheaply and quickly as possible. And another big mistake that founders make is they spend way too much time on the MVP and they try to create an actual fully fleshed out shipping product. And this is where a lot of mistakes are made, because if you don't have your customer involved in the development process of your product here, you lose out tremendous opportunities, and the likelihood of you making mistakes is tremendous. And that's a fatal blow for many companies that don't take advantage of that.
Yep. So it's kind of like with the principles of build as you go, and then you've got to put it out there in the marketplace to get real feedback, right?
Right.
And so one of the things you mentioned is to ensure that they have enough runway, right, or time to really create that MVP. We see in the market, in the past few years, there are a lot of tech companies, especially who are burning through millions and millions of investors' money, and then making constant losses, right? So when does it make sense for an investor, okay, or an entrepreneur to go that route of, okay, I'm going to commit to breaking into the market, no matter how much it takes, versus going the route of, okay, I'm going to take one step at a time, build up, sustain based off of my profitability. So yeah, perhaps you could go into detail into these two different paths.
Gotcha. So there's two kind of different mindsets in Silicon Valley, and there's a bit of a shift happening here in how people go about raising money and what kind of metrics matter with regards to receiving investment even over here. A lot of the metrics that used to be important are no longer important or are less important. And one of those metrics is the idea of how many installations you have in your software application, or how many people have downloaded your application, or how many people are using your application, or how many people are spending how much time on your application. These metrics that used to make a lot of sense for folks to be able to invest in. They could make some kind of, or guess, a correlation between installs and value of a company, are less valuable now, because there has been proven more and more, there's data showing that those types of what we call traction or success don't correlate to actual ongoing performance benefit for those startups. And so there was a case, there is a discussions from ENIAC VC on a data set of 160 seed stage startups 11 years ago, and they tracked all these companies that they invested in that had traction, and they weren't able to correlate traction to performance, quality performance. So an exit or a sizable ability to scale. And there's a distinction though that I would make for that. What they didn't do was a deep dive on cash related, income related traction versus non-income related traction. And what I mean by that is downloads doesn't mean anything if people aren't ultimately willing to give you $1, to spend on this. So I could have 1 million people downloading something for free, but when I charge, they decide they're not interested and they're going to move to some other application, right? Versus a company here who may have 10,000 people who pay them $1. That's something that people can take more seriously, because if I can get 10,000 people to give me $1, can I get those same 10,000 people to give me $10? Or can I get 100,000 people to give me $1? These allow you some ability to use math to determine the opportunity available to you. So ultimately, the decision of I'm going to spend a lot of money to go grab market share is based upon an what's becoming a quickly dated approach of how to invest in a company, because there's no direct correlation between eyeballs or grabbing, what do you mean by market share? Do you mean attention in the market, or do you mean actually dollars in the market, right? And so getting dollars in the market is more of a bootstrapping concept that is more for an entrepreneur versus the market domination approach, which is more from an investor acquisition. You're acquiring a market, right? Or you're acquiring retention. The trouble here is that you can go acquire a lot of market attention and not have that turn into revenue. And as a result of that, we've seen so many companies go through that approach and fail terribly as a result, and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are wasted as a result. We had $320 billion last year of private equity in the United States invested. And the stats are showing about half of these companies are going to fail just because of this one idea of product market fit, not having the right product market fit. So the marketing approach here that I'm looking at for folks is to make sure that they understand the customers that have an urgent and pressing need for what they're offering, which is different from a lot of companies that are offering some kind of future technology. We could talk about that a lot here. I hope that answers your question. I could talk about this for days.
Yep. That definitely answers my question. Yeah, and the thought that comes to mind is there such a thing as too big to fail? People, investors and entrepreneurs throw in all of this money to get that market domination, and their brands it becomes a household name. Does it come to a point where it's too big to fail?
Right. For sure. The challenge here is that really applies to enterprise companies in my mind. It applies to banks, it applies to enterprise companies, but here in the United States, we've seen companies, through the 2008 economic crisis in particular is where that made a big impact. We saw how companies that, if they were to fail, how it would affect the economy. But we're also speculating too now, should we have allowed many of these companies to be bailed out, or should we have let them fail? And so there's a lot of discussion and controversy about if we took the right approach back then. So I think the answer here at this point, when it comes to a startup, there are no startups that are too big to fail. And here's why: because ultimately a company has to be able to extract value from customers. It has to be able to get $1, right? And if it can't do that, there are so many people competing for that space, so many smart people in so many areas competing against you. It's harder and harder now to be able to get away without generating revenue or profit.
Yep, definitely. So we've always got to go back to the fundamentals of profit and providing value and extracting value, as you mentioned. So what is a common myth that entrepreneurs have about investors when it comes to fundraising?
I think there's a couple. On one hand, some founders are worried that an investor, once they give you their money, they're going to control your company. And so they have a real big concern about equity. And will I lose my company? Is somebody going to come in and tell me what to do? Is somebody going to come and take over my business as a result of this? And they hesitate to raise money because they don't want to lose control, or because they want to keep the equity and thinking that that's going to provide them with great wealth down the road potentially. So there's a misconception on two parts. One, that investors want to take over and run your business. That's not true. And number two, that holding on to equity is more effective for you than sharing that equity amongst many people who want to see you succeed. And the idea we say very often is a small slice of a pie, a wonderful pie, is better than a whole pie that's worth nothing, right? And so that's on one side. On the other side, I think the notion that you can entertain or manipulate investors through communicating through words and jargon, that words and jargon matter. When it comes to invest, and that somehow if you know the right buzzwords, if you know the right jargon words, that investors are going to be excited about your business because of, you're using the right terminology. That couldn't be further from the truth. It is almost an instantaneous red flag, which I call a deal-killing principle, that if you're not speaking plainly about your offer and how it benefits your audience, that is almost a telltale sign that you lack credibility in the area in which you're trying to raise money for. Your ability to speak plainly, simply, and get people to understand you and relate to you is so vital that if you're unable to get people to relate to, even on a basic level, it is probably one of the very fastest ways for an investor to lose interest in you as a potential investee.
Yeah, it's all about having that connection and to speak plainly. And I think, as you mentioned, investors, especially nowadays, they are getting more and more sophisticated. They are not not going to get conned by all of the window dressing, all of the fancy words. So when it comes to businesses across all different industries, can all businesses raise funds? Can anyone just raise funds for their businesses?
Well, okay, so technically, yes, anybody could raise funds, right? It's what kind of funds are they trying to raise, and to what amount are they trying to raise? So depending upon the kind of investors that you're working with, there are regulations in place here that has strict regulations on how you raise money. But we have opportunities such as Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and opportunities now with unaccredited investors, as well as, of course, accredited investors. So there's far more channels now for people to raise money than ever before, and access to capital is still widely available here for folks who have proven themselves in the past. One of the easiest way to be able to get access to capital is to have had a success in a previous company, where you've had a successful exit of some sort, and you have a team ready to go, and you're involved in the new approach is related to the previous approach. And so if you've had success in the past, it's far easier to get money, and most of the investment that's taken place to date is based upon people who've had success in the past. And so there's pros and cons with that, right? If you think about it like this, investors are trying to get the highest possible return, and yet also mitigate the risk, right? And so the way that investors in Silicon Valley and savvy technology investors around the world, the way they mitigate that risk is by basically betting on proven people who have proven successful in the past. And so it's very much like in Hollywood. If you have a very famous movie star and you have an idea for a movie, if you can secure that famous movie star to be the leading man or woman in your movie, then it's likely going to be very successful, because that person has a track record of success, and they have fans, and they have an audience, and they have proven to be able to sell tickets. Same thing happens in Silicon Valley and technology companies around the world. So if you have somebody with a successful SaaS application for human resources, and they may be having a successful exit, and they're going to do another application in a related area, the likelihood of them being able to get money is very high. And also they're able to do it very quickly as well.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, that immediately reminds me of like Tom Cruise. Apparently, Tom Cruise, I don't know about his latest movie, but prior to this whole pandemic, he has never had a flop when it comes to film. So he's a darling in Hollywood. So
That's
do
right.
you think that nowadays entrepreneurs have to really take care of their own personal brand as well? Or because there's this push and pull, should I focus my attention on building up my company's brand, or should I focus my attention on building up my personal brand, especially with the advent of social media and the likes of Sir Richard Branson, Elon Musk, who are really leveraging off their personal brands?
Great question. You know, I think your personal brand is vital for your ability to negotiate deals that are more in your favor. If you can establish yourself as a celebrity or as an authority, and you become a known quantity, that helps you to open doors to higher quality deals. It also builds trust and credibility for you as well. There's not necessarily a direct correlation between your celebrity and how effective your business idea is going to be, right? My idea is as great as somebody who you never heard about, right? The difference is that if I've established a reputation and credibility, then people are more likely to trust that I've gone through an appropriate level of thinking, and that because my reputation is valuable to me, that I'm not going to engage in something that is going to lessen that reputation or destroy that reputation. So two people of the same skill set with the same level of experience with the same idea quality, the person that has a higher brand awareness and is going to have an easier time getting access to meetings. They're going to have more opportunity during those meetings to build engagement and relatability, and they'll be able to negotiate on more favorable terms. So I think there is a very clear economic benefit for building your personal brand, which, by the way, can transfer to any business. So if you're investing in a business brand, then the business brand, if it fails or succeeds, there's a trouble. If your business brand succeeds, how are you establishing your reputation so that when you're ready to start your next company, people are associating you with that more easily? If you have a strong personal brand, you're able to make that transition, and it becomes an asset that you can transfer from business to business or situation to situation.
Hmm. And what about that fine balance where people associate your brand, your company's brand, to you as the individual, and then eventually, when you're looking to exit the business, the investors' faith or people's faith in the company drops. How do you mitigate that?
That's a great question. A lot of family businesses that have lasted for generations that go under their names have a problem with that. A lot of companies that have a direct, advertising agencies do this. Uh, um, Financial institutions do this. So many organizations go under a person's name. Trouble is that those companies have a very hard time, unless they become incredibly wildly successful. They have a hard time selling because they're so identified with a person to be able to take that business over. I think of Charles Schwab here in the United States. Once Charles Schwab decided to retire, right, there's questions about the value of that company. He established an incredible company here in the investor space, personal investing space. But when he decided to retire, what's that transition between him as the name Charles Schwab and the next person who would be taking over for him, right? It's a little bit different for Starbucks, for instance. So Howard Schultz, as the CEO of Starbucks, may or may not be the CEO at any given time, right? But Starbucks as a brand itself can be independent of Howard Schultz, the CEO. Uh, One reason that I believe strongly in this is that if your intention is to create something that has a lasting legacy, uh, and if you want the opportunity to be able to exit, then you need a name that is transferable, because that brand and that name itself is an asset, a valuable asset. So for instance, why did I name my company Pitchfreak rather than Antonio White, right? Antonio White, a pitch guy, right? And that's because I'm building a series of assets within Pitchfreaks that can be transferred at some point, if necessary, if interesting, that becomes its own asset regardless of me. If you build a business around your name, here's another thing. What happens when you sell your business? If you sell your business, you're likely selling the rights to your name in business often, or you are at least creating a scenario in which you cannot compete under your own business, under your own name in a related field. So there's inherent problems if you are using a name that's tied to your name rather than a name that can be independent and transferable and outside of your own name.
So by default, you would recommend that when entrepreneurs are building up their companies, building up the company's brand, is to focus on an independent brand, independent from their own personal names.
Right. And here's the challenge. If you're a coach, right, if you're a Tony Robbins, right, if you're a Joel Bauer, if you are Brennan Bouchard, a Gary Vee, right, these names have value because they have reputations, right? What happens when Tony Robbins wants to sell his business? Who's going to buy Tony Robbins' business, right? That's the challenge. That's a challenge, right? And so if you buy Tony Robbins' assets, right, and Tony Robbins isn't a part of this anymore, then what happens? Do you lose value as a result of not having that person along with your company anymore? And we see with Russell Brunson, he purchased basically Dan Kennedy's whole company, right? He owns all of Dan Kennedy's marketing assets. So the challenge here is that it took Dan Kennedy, who is still alive, of course, working with Russell Brunson to help Russell Brunson make the transition so that folks know that ClickFunnels now has the content for Dan Kennedy. But that was a very big challenge. I mean, I think Dan Kennedy really had a hard sell with that because ultimately he's so identified with his content. What happens if he's no longer representing the content? So he had to almost kind of anoint Russell Brunson as the new king in that regard with that handoff. That was a very tricky handoff because obviously Dan Kennedy has a very valuable content, but what happens if Dan Kennedy is no longer delivering that content? Does it still have the same value and prestige? And so I think they've made a very good, or I should say, as good as you can, transition from a Dan Kennedy to ClickFunnels and Russell Brunson. I think that was a very difficult, challenging transaction that happened. And if it was simply Magnetic Marketing was the company, and I purchased that company, Magnetic Marketing, and now those assets are part of ClickFunnels, I think that's a much easier deal to do and much easier for most people to understand.
Yep. And, as Tyra says, great information to know when creating a brand and model. Tyra is joining us from the US as well, live right now. So to our the title of our topic, so how do we make investors line up and beg to give us money?
Right. This is about 8 years in development in this specific area. And over the past 2 years in particular, I've done a deep dive in this space. The number one challenge that people have is getting attention and interest and engagement from investors. It is the number one fatal deal-killing flaw that most investors make, is they say the wrong thing to the wrong person. And what I've done over this time is develop a process, a framework, a system that is transferable, that anybody can apply, and they simply fill in the blanks based upon their specific business, experience set, and what have you, to instantly get attention and engagement from investors. So here's the challenge. People aren't taught how to do this in school, or to the degree that they are taught, they're taught in a way that doesn't really transfer or translate to Silicon Valley and real tech operators. They learn how to pitch from Shark Tank. They think that they learn how to pitch from TED Talks. So folks, I hear a lot of folks, I call this story stacking, by the way. So I hear a lot of pitches that take, story stacking is a meandering story leading up to your pitch. By the way, it is the number one deal killer. The number one deal killer of all investor pitches is story stacking. Nobody's talking about story stacking. Let me tell you what story stacking is. There's 3 parts of story stacking, and I'm learning more and more all the time. Number one is called pitch prefacing, or prefacing your pitch. And a prefacing of your pitch means you're prefacing your pitch with a story. That story is normally a story of what led you to create this invention, what led you to create this offer, this product, this service, what have you. Some long meandering story of how you came up with this idea. And then you share the pitch. That's pitch prefacing, right? The other one is I call CV stacking. So CV stacking is basically telling a long meandering story about your work and educational history that led you to this invention or this creation that you made. So I went to this school, I graduated at this time, I have this level of success, I went to this company, I managed this people, this is the project that we did, and over these periods of years, I discovered this opportunity, and here it is. That's called CV stacking. And the third one is called trauma dumping. Trauma dumping is where you hear a very tragic, traumatic, very personal story that normally you would only tell to a doctor, a therapist, your religious person that you might speak with, or a close family member or a friend. It's something that you would normally not want people to know about because it's so personal and traumatic. And you'd be shocked how frequently people trauma dump before they actually make their pitch. And there's reasons behind this, but normally I think people are getting information from the wrong sources and applying these pitch principles and practices to investors, and it's an absolute deal killer up front. And there's a couple reasons why. Investors have very little time to spend on these pitches. The average Silicon Valley venture capital and angels spends 3 minutes reviewing a pitch deck. An entire pitch deck, 3 minutes. Here's something to think about. The whole concept with my book, Close with Your Open, is based upon the principle of a YouTube ad view charge. Meaning, what does that mean? That means that there's a study with YouTube, and what YouTube was able to discover is that 20% of the people who click on a headline or on a video, a thumbnail in YouTube, abandon that video within the first 10 seconds. 20% of the people who click on a link or a headline or a thumbnail abandon the video within the first 10 seconds. What does that mean? That means that they were searching for something or something was presented to them, they clicked on it, and they left within 10 seconds. Well, why is that? Some people might say, well, it's because it's clickbait, perhaps. In reality, there are millions and millions of videos available on YouTube. And there's so many opportunities and avenues for you to find information that entertains you or educates you. If you're not finding exactly what you want right away, you can simply leave without problem whatsoever and move on to something else. So what happens is people think, well, people have a very small attention span, and the attention span is shorter and shorter. I don't believe that that's true. What I believe is true is that people can make decisions much faster. And so YouTube used to charge an ad view after somebody would view an ad on YouTube for 10 seconds. Now YouTube charges advertisers an ad view with only 3 seconds. What does that mean? That means that people's ability to make a decision to click off an ad or to click on an ad and engage with it is faster. And because we have more technology, more offerings, people are able to make decisions faster. And so what does that mean? If you're an investor, here's what it means for a founder. Investors can decide if you're an investable founder within 3 seconds. They can make a determination that they will not invest in you that fast. And so what does that mean? That means that the first few words out of your mouth better be focused entirely on your value from the prospect of that investor's point of view, right? And what happens is if you tell a meandering story, if you story stack, that is separating you. That's adding time. And what's going to happen is an investor is going to have to decide, am I going to listen to this story? Is this an important story? Should I follow this story? And you confuse people, and they don't know where you're going in many of these situations. For the folks who don't story stack, eliminate story stack. If you listen to one thing on this call, eliminate story stacking. Your pitch will be far more improved. You'll get far more engagement and attention simply if you get to your pitch. And I've got dozens and dozens of things that you can apply to secure interest in investors as well. But story stacking is the number one deal killer that people apply today when it comes to making their pitch.
Wow. Yep. Story stacking. I think it's very very easy to take one principle from one field and then you try to apply it to another field and then it just doesn't work. It just bombs. So with the attention span, or rather the window of opportunity to capture an investor's attention, being so small nowadays, would you say that it's is getting more and more competitive to get money. I mean, in terms of supply and demand, is there more money in the market versus ideas, or is there more ideas in the market, viable ideas in the market versus the money ready for investment?
So this is a great question. There's no one right answer for this, right? The challenge here is that there's incredible amounts of money to invest. The challenge is, where is this money being invested in? If you talk to founders, they'll say it's very hard to get access to dollars. If you talk to investors, they'll say, I don't see enough good quality deals, right? So there's a discussion on both sides of the fence. I think the answer here in reality is there aren't enough good deals. Most people who are pitching probably should not be pitching for investment dollars. Ultimately, you have to be very rigorous and have a very focused approach in your business before you can expect the investor to give you money. Most people simply believe falsely that if I have a great idea, all I need is a great idea, and somebody's going to give me money. The challenge here is that you and everybody on planet Earth has great ideas. It's the people who get the money are the people who are able to execute, who are able to take action, who are able to show results. And that's really where funders who get invested are separated from funders who don't. The people who can demonstrate that they can make a dollar, that they can engage a customer base, that they can deliver a service, even if it's a initial version of that service, those people are very special breed of people. Those people are freakish people who are dedicated to their mission, whatever that mission happens to be. So whether you're a baking company and you want to be the largest bakery in the United States for healthy baking goods, or whether you want to have a SaaS platform for whatever you happen to be, or a product or a service or whatever that happens to be, you can tell the people who are truly passionate, who want to make a really meaningful difference for their customers, versus the people who are just simply trying to participate in startup life, if you will, that want the identity of an entrepreneur or startup executive here, but aren't really directly tied in a meaningful way to their company and to the customers.
Yep. And we have Grant Morrell, of course, also one of our speakers who's sharing and reiterating on your point. Don't story stack, state the benefits to the potential investor quickly and just get to the point. Yeah,
That's right.
And definitely, with what you've shared, let's dive deeper into that. Who do you think should raise funds and who shouldn't raise funds at all?
Right. People who should raise funds, for sure, people who should raise funds are people who have such a demand for their business that they can't fulfill all of the demand for their business with their current available assets, with their current available liquidity. These are the people who should absolutely be raising money. The people who should not be raising money, and so let me be a little bit more clear about that. You have a business, you've already demonstrated that you are selling, you've got, let's just call it a SaaS product. And so you have an amount of server time available to you, or you have an amount of servers for your business, but you have so many people using your application and paying to use your application that you can barely afford to keep up with the server costs to be able to fulfill the product offering to your customer base. And so you need more money to invest in more servers. You need more money to invest in more technology people to fill the demand. You need more customer service people. You need more sales people. You need more ability to deliver for a demanding business, right? And so if you're trying to scale and you have a large audience that you're trying to fulfill, it's very tough, if not impossible, to do that out of pocket. It's very hard to do that out of pocket. And in many cases, you have to scale fast because there are people who will get funding who can take your idea and scale it faster. So it really depends upon what kind of business that you want to have. So if you're the kind of person that wants to build a world-class unicorn-style business with millions of customers and scale quickly, it's very hard to do that in any other way other than getting private equity. It's very hard to do that. Now, you were talking about SPACs. We talked about SPACs and so on early, and that's another way to do that. But that is a different kind of animal than what we're talking about, right? What we're talking about really here is moving from startup here and scaling. And so IPO versus SPAC versus other kinds of ways to address, your fundings and to grow, develop those assets and those resources here. There's so many different ways to go about doing this. So many companies never even go IPO. They end up getting they merge with another company. The M&As are very large in this space, right? And not only that, for companies who aren't able to build a giant audience, some of them just get acqui-hired. So what that means is a company simply just hires the people from that company to have them work for them. And so there's a great story about that with Casey Neistat. So a lot of people know Casey Neistat from YouTube, and he built a company with some founders called Beam. And Beam had an interesting application that they were developing, but they weren't able to get enough people to use the application. They weren't able to get enough people to pay for this application, so they weren't able to get product market fit. However, the people who were behind the company were very talented people. And so CNN ultimately ended up paying, I think, $25 million, $20 or $25 million, just to hire the team from Beam to come work for them. And so that's an acqui-hire. And so there's lots of different ways to exit your business as well. So there's so many different avenues. But so people who should be raising money are the people who need to grow faster and don't have access to capital unless they get investor support to do that. The people who should not be raising money are the people who have not made any proven claim whatsoever that somebody will spend $1 working on their product. If you have not talked to a customer, if you do not have customer surveys, if you do not have agreements with customers to buy your application, either through a letter of intent or through a pre-sale or through any sort of verifiable discussion, survey, conversation, what have you, if you have not had enough conversations with customers and they have not demonstrated there is a demand that I will pay you money for, you should not be raising money from investors. If you have a lot of installs of your application or your service or your product, and that is not translated into dollars, that's where you're in that mix, right? That's where you're in that kind of questionable zone. Should you raise money or should you not raise money? And the answer here is leverage your customers. If you have installs on your product, you need to, as quickly as possible, figure out how people will support that through some sort of financial contribution. Will they donate to your business? Will they contribute in some kind of capacity just to demonstrate that you can even make a few dollars on this application? If people aren't willing to give you $1, either $1 a month as a subscription or a one-time dollar for some sort of benefit here, that is a very good indicator that you're in the entertainment business, not in the startup business.
Yeah. It's very easy to, especially with all of the vanity metrics, to get distracted, by the number of views, the number of followers, and then at the end of the day, is it a hobby, right, or is it a real business? And
right,
so
I call that performance art. Right, the difference between a business person and an artist is one can just tell a story and not have to get people to take action and not have to generate any money, right? And so if you're in business going through this approach and building this company and building this thing and you're not able to generate money for it and you have no intentions of generating a profit, then you're engaged in performance art.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any guidelines for entrepreneurs out there when it comes to planning or raising funds for the future? How much of their company should they be willing to give away, especially if they are considering, you've got the pre-seed, the seed round, the A, B, series A, B, and so on and so forth. How should entrepreneurs think when it comes to allocating equity for investors?
So, all right, this is a great question, and I'm going to, there's so many different rounds that we have when it comes to investment in Silicon Valley, and just to be clear, those types of deals are outside of most of my scope of what I talk about. But what I can talk about are the seed rounds, are the founders here who are just starting off or looking for their first seed round or an A round. And those rounds are basically going to be under $1 million, maybe somewhere between $3 million and under is considered an A round here. Although you can see rounds at 5 and 8 and so on. But let's just basically call it somebody's looking for somewhere between $100,000 and $1 million, right? Think about it like this. The amount of legal fees tied in Silicon Valley to do a deal for $1 million raise is about $50,000 to $100,000 just in legal fees. Right? So that must mean that you have a really great plan available to you to grow quickly to make a whole bunch of money. Because if I'm going to spend $100,000 on just legal fees that has nothing to do with you building your product or your marketing or what have you, I must really believe in you. Because basically, if you aren't able to deliver that, that $100,000 is completely lost. It's not an asset that's transferable, right? So think about it like that. So a lot of people in that regard ask for too little money from an investor. So that's also a sign here of inexperienced founder when they're not asking enough money to be able to achieve their goal. If you think about it like this, if you're asking for a $100,000 raise, right? Most investors at the A round level here, you're probably not big enough for them. So you're talking to the wrong person. So you really want to be talking to angels rather than you're talking to venture capital groups or so on. Most companies are way too small to be even talking to venture capital groups as well. By the way, there's so many other venues for folks to be able to raise money. You have pitch competitions throughout the United States. There are tens and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars available just through pitch competitions, through churches, city organizations, private philanthropy groups, through chambers of commerce. Some pitch organizations come through VCs and venture capitals who have social impact missions that they want to offer, universities. There are hundreds of millions of dollars available. Actually, Serena Williams, the famous tennis player, last year gave $1 million prize to the winner of an HBCU pitch competition in December of last year. And he had an application. It was a construction-based application to help reduce the cost of changeovers. And so it was an app for basically reducing the cost of changeovers. And Serena Williams gave him $1 million for his winning the pitch competition. There are multiple companies, multiple organizations in the US that have $1 million prizes for pitch competitions, right? So there's so many different channels now available for folks to raise money. And by the way, we have pitch competitions for a $5,000 prize for an elevator pitch. You have organizations that aren't even concerned if you have a large ability to scale. They just want to help people in different groups. You know, are you a female? Are you a person of color? Or do you have some particular heritage? Do you have perhaps a disability, or do you have an interest that we want to advance you as in your sector, space or security or what have you? People are willing to offer money to help grow audiences where there's a deep need, but a lack of people in those areas. So there's lots of areas for you and opportunities to raise money that don't have to go through traditional angels or investors or so on. And those rules to get that money are far less and much easier. Obviously, there's still lots of competition. And what we talk about how to get people excited applies as well to those pitch competitions too.
Great, yeah, and yeah, definitely plenty of avenues, and what we've been hearing a lot is examples from the U.S. Right, where you're based in. With what you teach, is it applicable globally?
Right, it's 100% transferable. I mean, look, here's the basic with what we're talking about. Every business is based upon words. Those words create people to take action or not. Those words get people to make a decision. That's a universal concept, right? If you are trying to get somebody to take action, it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. Words are coming out of your mouth, and you have an intention behind those words, which is to get somebody to take some kind of an action. So the principles apply across the board. Now, there may be some different ways in which you express these concepts. But here's the thing. An investor pitch is the easiest pitch to make on planet Earth. Why is that? Because we have a very clearly defined goal. We know a pitch that does not attract investors' interest in making money isn't going to work. It's not going to be effective, right? So we know going in, investment is universal too, by the way, right? Investors around the world want to make money. They want to make as much money as they possibly can. They're looking for as many wonderful opportunities as they possibly can, right? I don't know any investors in any part of the world that don't want to make money, right? So these principles are universal. So if we already know that we have a system that directly attracts and engages people who want to make money, and we have a framework and a system that is easy to apply, that anybody can do it, right? Then that process, so the words may change, the language may be different, but the framework is the same.
Yep, and like what Tyra shares, words are very powerful, especially when you combine it with emotions. And how is it that you
Yes.
can align it with what the investors want, which at the core of it, like what you mentioned, everybody wants to make money, right?
Yes, and Tara makes a very good point, by the way. In my book, I write about there's three key things that you need to be able to do. The first thing you need to be able to do is articulate your value from the prospect's perspective. So ultimately, what that means is the investor has is going to receive value from you specifically from their point of view, right? And so what happens is a mistake that many people make, founders, technology people, manufacturers, creative people, they talk about their product from their perspective. I like my product because I think it's cool. I like my product because it's blue. I like my product because it's in this box. I like my product because I spent a lot of time making it. Investors don't care about that, right? All they care about is, can your product make money? Right? And so as a founder, there's two things to think about. Number one, you need to think about yourself not in making a sale, right? Not in a transaction, even though it's a transaction in a way. You need to think about yourself not selling, but serving. Okay. And then you need to also you have to take off your production hat and put on your investor hat. Okay. That's vital. Those two things will absolutely help relieve a lot of anxiety that you have when making pitches. Number one, put yourself in the investor's perspective. How does your business bring that investor value, right? For instance, we talk about the idea of a thesis, an investor thesis. Well, the way to find out if you can bring investor value or not is by learning about that investor. Have you researched the investors that you're talking to? Have you gone to their website? Do you know what kind of businesses that they like to invest in? Do you know the type of industries that they like to invest in? Do you know that their philosophy about investment? These are called investment theses, and you can find them on most high quality investor websites. Most founders don't do research on the investors before they pitch them. It is a valuable opportunity that can put the leverage opportunity to your advantage. I call it stacking the pitch deck in your favor. And so I could talk about that, all these kind of tricks all day long.
Great, yeah, definitely. Very very good tips. Especially it's essentially putting yourself in the investor's feet, and then your investor's shoes, and in general, just understanding who you're speaking with, and connecting with them on deep level. So, could you share with us perhaps a story of one of your most recent success stories in someone who has used your process and successfully raised funds for their business?
The easy one is Alzheimer's Neuro. In 2020, I started working with Alzheimer's Neuro, and this was during the pandemic, the deepest part of the pandemic, and the company ultimately was at risk of going out of business. And the company itself is a biotech company trying to create a solution to reduce the impact of Alzheimer's so that people can lead a longer quality of life. And they also have a potential opportunity to a vaccine for Alzheimer's to potentially eliminate that as a possibility. It's very early stage, but during the pandemic, they could not get enough positive attention for their business. And during the struggles of the economy as well, they were having a hard time getting people's attention because they had a very difficult challenge in explaining what it was that they were doing. And they had a very difficult challenge of explaining their role, why people should care about their particular solution. And so we had to create three key pitches for them. We had to create an authority pitch for Todd. We had to create a company pitch for Alzheimer's Neuro, and we had to create a product pitch for the two proposed therapeutic treatments as well for that company. And as a result of applying those principles that we'll be teaching at our event, the company was able to launch a $100 million fund, which we'll share exactly how we went about that approach, which I think a lot of people will find that very fascinating, what's involved in creating a pitch for a $100 million fund. And they were able to apply those principles to establish a personal brand in a very deep, meaningful way for Todd Alt. And as a result of that, through that personal brand and through that explanation of the technology and the solution here, they had a successful IPO in May or June of last year and a $425 million market cap. So to go literally from almost going out of business to a $425 million market cap IPO, that's a pretty fun story. I got lots of other fun stories, and by the way, there's lots of fun stories that are very exciting that didn't have that level of success. That maybe we helped a small family who was engaged in a very manual labor type of business, and through applying these principles, getting deals with retailers and switching from a family a business that was very manually focused to actually building a distributing organization and running a group. So we had, for instance, Tasha Yankowitz from Ritual Chick is a company that worked with me, and she was going to be a massage therapist and a public speaker. But I discovered using this principle here that she had a dream to have a candle business inside Whole Foods, which is a very popular high-end grocery store here in the United States. And going through this process, we were able to secure a deal with Whole Foods for 31 stores, which represent the entire state of Florida, to carry her product. And with 120 days, we actually had fulfilled that order, or she fulfilled that order, applying these same principles. And she reported publicly that within less than 8 months, she had generated over $80,000 of revenue from that one deal from her candle business, and was able to fulfill her dream of being able to have her candles inside Whole Foods. So for that person and that family, it's life-changing money. And not only that, it offers her the opportunity to build a great business that's not based upon just trading dollars for hours, because she can grow Ritual Chick now to be a nationwide provider of these beautiful purpose-driven candles. And that's at ritualchick.com, so you can check that out. And also too, I just read today from Todd, he made a post. He said his biggest accomplishment in life, his biggest professional accomplishment, is being able to take Osman Neuro public, because his father has Alzheimer's disease. And so he has a deep meaning passion to be able to solve this problem. And he's able to do it in a way leveraging Pitchfreak's approach and Pitchfreak's principles to be able to sell that to all the different people that need to be able to understand the value of the opportunity and understand the vision of the company as well.
Wow. It sounds like, not only are the numbers impressive, and then, it ranges from skills as well, but underlying it all, I can really feel the deeper fulfillment when you're able to help these business owners, right? And I believe that's the heart of Pitchfreaks, and that is your heart. I see that with the companies that you engage in, there's a deeper purpose and a value to be given to humanity as a whole. Would you say so?
Yeah, that's really important for me. It's easy for me to be able to help a company succeed when I can feel connected to their mission. And ultimately, it's the founder's mission, and they have to be able to sustain and persevere through many difficult challenges that they might face. But if they have a true mission to make a meaningful contribution to the world, it's very easy to help them and to get committed to them. And you start feeling like this is part of your business as well. And in many cases, I receive equity from these businesses on top of it here. So there's personal benefit as well as professional benefit. And because I've been doing this so long, I'm able to pick and choose the kind of companies that I like to work with. So I like to work with companies here who are trying to really create and uplift people around the world.
Wonderful, Antonio. And so with that, thank you very much for joining us through this session. And definitely for those of you who are joining us live or joining us on this replay, if you would like to learn more from Antonio, he will be at our upcoming launch event. You can learn more about it at www.summitasia.com/launch, where he will be sharing more about his insights when it comes to pitching and raising finance amidst a host of other amazing speakers. And of course, you'll be seeing more of Antonio on our learning platform. So with that, Antonio, do you have any last words that you'd like to share that would help entrepreneurs who want to raise funds successfully?
Yeah. First of all, Ching Yu, I really appreciate the opportunity here. It's been great to develop our friendship over time, and I really believe in your organization and what you're trying to do and the value that you're trying to bring to your community as well. So thank you for letting me be a part of that. I really, it's very meaningful to me. So thank you for that, number one. Um, for founders, it can be very lonely to be a founder, and it can be anxiety-inducing as well. And sometimes you may feel like you want to give up, and you're not alone in that. That's a very pervasive feeling amongst founders, even in Silicon Valley. Even with folks having millions and millions of dollars of funding, they can feel very, very alone. Being a part of a community like Ching Yu's group with SummitLive is a vital resource for you to give you energy, insight, and information so that you can make the most informed decisions to grow your business. So I just want to tell you one thing. You're not alone. And you have a community of people here who care about your success. You have a community of people here who are particularly skilled in their area and can show you and transfer their knowledge for you. I want to be able to transfer my 30 plus years of knowledge here to you, and I've been able to create a framework that is able to help you to do just that. You're not alone. If you're struggling to get investor interest and attention, by the way, there's a bonus for this. This same concept also applies to customers. So if you're a company that has difficulty in getting key early customers to validate you, you can apply these same principles to customer pitches as well. So the investor pitch is very vital for you to be able to grow your business. And the key problem that people have is getting attention and engagement. So it's so expensive to get attention and engagement here. You want to make sure you make the most out of every opportunity. So we've got you covered. We've got your back. We're prepared and ready for you and can't wait to share this knowledge with you. Ching Yu, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Antonio. And as we can see in the chat, we've got Tyra who says thank you, Antonio. Michelle as well from Australia saying thank you, and Tyra saying it's a beautiful, loving, sharing, and caring community we have here in Summit, and we are really blessed to be able to have amazing speakers, trainers, and educators like yourself with decades of experience and to transfer that to our community. So thank you very much, Antonio. And for those of you, again, thank you very much for watching this session. We are live every Thursday at 6 p.m. GMT +8. So make sure you follow us at Summit Asia. And then, of course, we'll be having our launch event on the 9th of April. You can check it out at www.summitasia.com/launch. Antonio will be there and a whole host of other amazing speakers who will be sharing their decades of insights and transferring it directly to you. And if you happen to miss this launch event, you've watched this video later on, you can always learn more at www.summitasia.com and drop any inquiries that you have to SummitLive at Summit Asia. So with that, thank you very much for joining us throughout this session. And then let me look through. Okay, just a couple more thank yous. Thank you, Tyra. Thank you, Michelle. Tyra has already reserved her seat. She's definitely looking forward to learning more from you, Antonio. With that, thank you very much, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you in the next Summit Live. Ciao for now.